During the UCP's annual general meeting, the premier said she feels happy and energized despite some boos from delegates.
I support a strong and sovereign Alberta within a united Canada. I know we might have a bit of a difference of opinion on that, but I hope people today feel a lot more confident that Canada works than they did a couple of days ago.
That they do not.
Smith claims there has been a complete turnaround in public opinion when it comes to Canadians and the energy industry. She has also said she understands why some delegates are unhappy with the memorandum of understanding that she signed with the federal government on Thursday, paving the way for a new oil pipeline to be approved under the Major Projects Law.
Yeah, so that's kind of the tricky part right now is even though we've got a memorandum of understanding for said pipeline, it's not the deal that people think it is, because there's, an increase in carbon tax by not only 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or percent, it's by 600%, so 6%. And that pisses off a lot of people, rightfully so. So if something does get addressed about the carbon emissions tax, and we do actually proceed with a pipeline, even though there's like massive amounts of Indigenous peoples and environmentalists and other smaller provincial parties and municipalities are saying they will absolutely do everything they can to block said pipeline. If for some reason we pull off a Hail Mary Mighty Ducks movie miracle and we get a pipeline, it's still not like a full-blown like hoorah, yes, we've got the pipeline. There's still not so good parts to it, as there is with pretty much everything else in Canada. That's how Canada functions. We punch ourselves in the wiener and then we ask for an ice pack. Like, that's just the Canadian tradition, I guess. I don't like it, but it's how our governments like to operate.
For years, Stephen Guilbeault was a major player in the federal Liberal Party. He was a prominent member of Justin Trudeau's cabinet and then Mark Carney's cabinet. But Guilbeault was also a climate change advocate. His departure from cabinet now raises questions about the role of activists in government and how they can navigate in politics while advancing a larger agenda. Guilbeault said he couldn't pursue his role in cabinet, considering Mark Carney is paving the way for a potential pipeline project in Western Canada. It's a paradox activists face, navigating between personal conviction and political interests.
It's just not a workable compromise. And that if you are going to hold to your principles and that you're going to have very, very significant red lines, that, again, big tent parties that are going to try to win support across hugely diverse regions, economies, and cultures in this massive country, you're going to have to compromise way too much.
Environmental activist Karel Méran has known Guilbeault for 25 years. Although Guilbeault was no longer environment minister, Méran sees his departure as a clear sign that he wasn't able to push his climate agenda as far as he wanted to.
It's as if the entire architecture of the federal climate plan is at risk now.
Other environmental advocates understand Guilbeault's decision considering the Liberal Party's shift.
Le verre hiver est tombé, c'est du noir pétrole sous les habits.
Carney's green polish disappeared. The color under his suit is oil black, says Bloc's environment critic, a former spokesperson for Greenpeace. He says he will continue to push for better climate policies at the Bloc Québécois, but other activists might come to a different conclusion.
A lot of activists will say, we are better outside the formal structures of government, trying to influence from the outside rather than getting in, making those compromises, because even when you get significant gains, like I think Mr. Guilbeault did, it can be reversed.
Despite the resignation statement, Guilbeault said he'll stay on as a Liberal MP. Green leader Elizabeth May has already called on him to join her caucus.
So it seems like there's a massive kind of cabinet shuffle that's taking place here. And, well, it's not looking that good for Mark Carney. People that used to be a part of the Trudeau Liberals are not wanting to be a part of Mark Carney, which signals a couple of things. One, we're getting rid of the radical leftists in this country in politics, which is great. But two, if they're no longer radical leftists and the party's shifting in a different direction, it's shifting more towards the center, towards the right, which means that if the Liberals are theoretically on the spectrum, shifting away from the left and they're moving towards the center, the Conservative Party, which is kind of in the center right now, has some tough choices to make. Are they going to stay in the center, or are they going to shift a little bit more to the right? And that's kind of what we're all waiting for to see happen, is a bit more of a conservative Canada. And if the Liberals are already doing their part by moving a little bit more towards the center, that's a good start. Get rid of all the cuckoos in the Liberal cabinet. I think that's phenomenal. I actually suggested that many years ago. I remember sitting in my basement 2 years ago in December of 2023 saying it's not looking good for Trudeau, and if he ever wants his party to survive and the Liberals to ever maintain power or have a hope of chance at power in the next 20 years, they have to get rid of all the radicals. And it seems like they're kind of doing that. That's good and bad. It's good because, again, to reiterate, getting rid of the woke radicals in politics is always a phenomenal thing. The bad part is if they're shifting more to the center, to reiterate, then the actual right of center party has to probably go a little bit further to the right. But we're going to have to wait and see how that one plays out. I know there's a lot of criticism towards the CPC and people want to see that next step of being a bit more conservative. So maybe this is the final push that they need, right?
Well, BC's premier seems to be softening in his stance against a potential West Coast pipeline following a new energy deal between Alberta and Ottawa last week. CTV National News reporter Colton Prale joining us with more on this. So, Colton, what exactly has David Eby said here?
Yeah, headline takeaway. The big news is that David Eby says he's open to a new pipeline so long as there is no carve-out and no changes to the northern tanker ban, the northern coastal tanker ban. So what does this actually mean? Well, for a BC premier who has repeatedly said, hey, there's no route, there's no pipeline, there's no money, there's no proponent, what he has effectively done is told private markets, told the big oil companies who will eventually be the proponent of this pipeline project if it does come to bear, that there is a route for them. There is a route through the port of Vancouver, and that's something that he is open to doing. The flip side to this is that it does raise larger questions about if there is room to change his opinion. Because if the BC Premier and Coastal First Nations are both effectively drawing the line at no changes at all or no risk tolerance to any kind of tanker traffic through the Hecate Strait or through the Dixon entrance, which is just west of Port Rupert, where we're already seeing liquefied petroleum gas go out, then it does limit severely what the federal government can do without superseding those jurisdictions. Now, they absolutely have the right to do that. The federal government can go over BC, they can go over the First Nations. A cross-border pipeline is their jurisdiction, but at this point in time, we've heard Mark Carney say that's not something that he is willing to do and that those consultations have to take place. So what this really lays out very clearly is that those consultations, if it was to go through the Port of Vancouver, are something that could go significantly easier with the BC Premier than if it was going to the northwest coast of Vancouver, or of BC, I should say.
So why is David Eby so insistent on keeping a tanker ban in place?
Really, it's the Coastal First Nations, and it's what has been described by the BC Premier and as these First Nations as an existential threat to their way of life. These are, we know, dangerous straits. There has recently been a diesel spill in the Hecate Strait, but the danger element is significantly increased if you are shipping crude and if you are shipping heavier forms of natural resources like LNG or light crude oil. And so the concern here is that even though it is likely to be significantly safer than when this ban was put in place in the 70s, there's new types of navigation, ships are double hulled, generally practices are much improved over the last 50 years. The concern is that there is zero risk tolerance, and that if this was to occur, it could devastate a billion-dollar industry and way of life for Coastal First Nations, and that is why he is still so vehemently opposed to this. He has signaled that he's interested interested in the expansion of TMX, that even a pipeline through Port of Vancouver would be okay by him. And those are both significant policy and position shifts from the Premier. But on this specific area, on the Northwest Coast, he is not budging at all. And he is consistently punting, saying that those conversations and those negotiations need to occur with coastal First Nations, who have also shown little movement on their part.
Okay, we'll see as this continues to unfold. Colton, thank you.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are pretty fed up with the First Nations blocking all of these nationwide projects. And it's actually kind of poetic that it's the Liberals that are kind of steamrolling through the First Nations without their consent, without their permission. And they're just apparently just going ahead and doing things anyways, because historically it's the Liberals that have been ultra progressive and established this Truth and Reconciliation Fund, and the fact that white man bad, reparations are needed, and we need to pay multi hundreds of billions of dollars over time, and it never ends. And now they're just going, nah, we're just going to do what we want. So if that happens, that's going to spark quite a bit of outrage. But it's kind of poetic. It's kind of poetic. I'd love to know what you guys think down below in the comments about that one.